May I have my panelists up here, please? Thank you very much. And thank you, Lynn. That was very entertaining. Very well done. First of all, I just want to sort of relate a little story about my own personal usage of broadcasting and broadcast media. I've had over-the-air TV for years. I had it here when I lived in DC. I had it in Marina Del Rey, and now I have it in the Palm Springs area. And one of the things I especially notice as somebody who works remote, so I'm virtual, I don't work personally with my employees, is actually how important local news is to me to feel connected to the community. Otherwise, I would have really none of the sort of visceral connections to the community that you normally have when you have a place of employment and you have colleagues. So I find it makes me feel more a part of the community, and I found it is personally important to me. So I wanted to share that with you. And a little bit of an analogy here I wanted to talk about. I was thinking about a practice that we have in the introspective communities of contemplating uncertainty and accepting all outcomes so that one might proceed effectively without attachment to a singular result. And I was thinking that there is no other time that this concept has been as applicable to the broadcast TV industry as it is today for a number of reasons. Technology is developing faster than it can be deployed in some instances, i.e. we're going from 1.0 to 3.0, right? 2.0? Not fast enough. Audience behavior and preference is becoming dynamically individualized, as we saw in, on the first panel in those presentations. Virtualization is replacing big iron in the media facility. That's changing workflows in ways that we've not seen before. A new broadcast standard that represents a fundamental departure from decades of linear one-way delivery, and perhaps the most certain of uncertainties, the first ever voluntary incentive auction of television spectrum to wireless providers. And thus we're here today to discuss business issues surrounding the incentive auction and the future of television. That's pretty heady subject. I have three of my esteemed panelists today. I'm not sure where is it. Lana, Ms. Thompson is coming. I beg your pardon? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right, very good. Mr. Goodman. First of all, I'd like to say that our four panelists actually uniquely represent specific segments of our industry. Hi. So we have national network, we have group local, we have family-owned local, and we have non-coms. Welcome. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Ms. Thompson. Ms. Lana Thompson is Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer, General Counsel, that's 3 hats, for the Association of Public Television Stations, where she's served for 2 decades. She was previously a communications lawyer in private practice for 10 years, and before that, she was a high school English teacher. Thank you for that. Okay. Next to her, we have Mr. Goodman. I think everyone knows the Goodman family and their legacy in Raleigh, North Carolina, where they've been pioneers on HD, on mobile, and they certainly have very, very deep roots in the community where they do a lot of work. Pardon me, I have to move my notes about. Mr. Goodman started as a camera operator at the 5 a.m. news at 16 years old, so it doesn't sound like he got a break from his father. He now serves on the board of directors and the executive committee, and he's vice president and general manager of CBC New Media Group at Capital Broadcasting and at Sunrise Broadcasting. And among his many projects, he developed and spun out News Over Wireless. I think we all remember that mobile platform, and orchestrated CBC's pioneering effort in HD TV. So thank you for that. Next to him, we have Mr. Eric Moreno. At the network level, Mr. Moreno is Senior Vice President of Corporate Development for Fox Networks. He leads Fox's efforts surrounding broadcast spectrum as well as other digital initiatives. He was previously with eBay and Level 3 Communications after starting his career in investment banking. He's a trustee of USA Funds, the nonprofit that provides financial support for post-secondary education, including mine. Thank you. Okay, and next to him, Ms. Ann Shelley. Shelley is Managing Director of Pearl TV. Now here we have group ownership, a consortium of I think 9 TV group broadcasters comprising 170 local network affiliates, serving 63% of the population. She also founded APS Connect LLC and was previously senior advisor to the NAB and executive director of the Open Mobile Video Coalition, where she led outreach efforts by broadcasters to introduce mobile DTV services. She serves on the advisory board of the Johns Hopkins Whiting School of Engineering for Professionals. So thank you all for being here. And I want to just kind of throw out, first of all, just start with maybe a little bit of a structural thing too. If at any point someone has a question during the panel discussion, please feel free to come up and stand at the microphone and we'll call on you. We want a little bit of a free form forum here today. So I'll throw this out real quick for each of you. From your perspective, please give us a quick synopsis of your thoughts on the auction from your particular constituency, i.e. is there no interest, are you kicking tires, or have you identified markets where participation makes sense? Ms. Thompson, if you would.
Great, thank you, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be here today. From a non-commercial TV perspective, we have always seen opportunities that the auction may provide for some of our members. I think those opportunities are limited in a sense to certain members in certain geographic locations. We have really also been looking at protecting our members. The flip side of that, there's a lot of change that will come that I think we'll probably talk about a little bit more in this panel, but that will impact the entire non-com system. In terms of the opportunities, we're really looking at opportunities for stations that are in major markets in which we have more than one public television station. And we have, because we're here in the DC area, many of us from here, are aware of a situation where we have 3 or 4 public TV stations all serving very different needs. We have a state network, we have a major producer for the system, and we have a small university licensee in DC. And there are opportunities there for those stations perhaps to look at sharing some spectrum, to perhaps look at sharing spectrum with other broadcasters. In other markets where we have only one public television station, which is a vast majority in the country, I think that the opportunities are less. But we've always been open-minded at APTS to exploring more efficient uses of the spectrum, and we're always open to entrepreneurial uses. The federal funding has always been the seed money for us. For every dollar we get, we generate, on average, $6 more. So we're entrepreneurial, we're open-minded, and we're exploring all options.
Okay. Mr. Goodman?
Yes, ma'am. So my opinion on the auction is I'm against it. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that movie, Kingpin. But anyhow, so the here's how I think about it. When you dissect what's going on here, the real losers at the end of the day, and you can measure this in different ways, but there is really one constituency that is a loser group, and that is those of us who want to remain in business, right? Think about it. I mean, guys who want to sell, they're good. FCC looks good. Senators, congressmen look good because they're getting all this money. And there's us sitting back with a potential for interference. And, that's what everybody thinks about. But I really think about operating a business, right? And we pay engineers to work for us, and those guys aren't supposed to be, changing out our frequencies and repacking our channels very often, right? I mean, heck, once in a lifetime type of thing. And here we are, when I really think through it, the losers are us who want ATSC 3.0. Because what's happening, or what could potentially happen if this is successful, and I call it an artificially sped incentive auction because I'm not necessarily against the concept of it. I'm actually against the concept of it happening so quickly and not being actually mapped and or integrated with a new transition to ATSC 3.0. I believe that's the most basically most conceptually sound way to do this. Otherwise, what are we looking at? We're looking at basically a repack after the auction, let's say in 2016. So they're saying they want it 18 months to 3 years. So we're talking about 2019, we're still going to be repacking, right? And then we repack in what, the next year or the next year after that, we're going to change all of our equipment out to ATSC 3.0? I mean, I understand there's ways to transition this and do it a different way. So, and then the other impact to me is we're just going to have a lot less frequencies, right, after this auction. So how do we actually do a transition with the number of frequencies we're going to end up with? So, you know, in short, I'd shorten it to the biggest concern I have as it relates to the auction is our ability to expeditiously get the ATSC 3.0 transition in place.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Moreno, please.
Well, thank you for having me. For us, it's an interesting one because we're fortunate in that we are in the center of the action with large market stations. We have duopolies. But we've taken, and I've taken this step as a strategist, to realize the situation we find ourselves in as broadcasters. As a matter of industrial policy, I think there's general agreement on both sides of the aisle that the government wants to have a different use for the spectrum. And so our view is that at the end of the day, for better or for worse, we're going to play the hand that is being dealt to us, which is an incentive auction, which is voluntary, which allows for people like us to participate and potentially be able to get cash for the spectrum. But we're also, you know, like Jimmy, operators, and we're going to be and continue to be in business. So we have to be able to understand more fundamentally, not whether or not the auction is going to happen, we welcome it to happen, but more importantly, the nuances around the rules. And that's where we're doing a lot of our work. What does it all mean? It includes what does it mean post-auction, which is where I think Jimmy's focused, but we still have lots of questions around how it even works over the next few months as the rules come out. So for us at this stage, we would say there's a lot of interest. We're studying it, we'd like to participate, but we still don't know and cannot definitively know whether we're going to participate up until we know what the rules are. But at the same time, at a macro level, we understand the government is committed to this. It's completely bipartisan, different president, different commissioner. It's going to happen. And so for us, as long as we're able to understand the rules, we can then make a rational business decision to participate or not.
Fair enough. Thank you. Ms. Shelley.
So, you know, Pearl's a business organization that's solely focused on the future of broadcasting. And when I say the future of broadcasting, that's really investing in future platforms, whether that's in 3.0 or addressable advertising today, but really laying the building blocks for where we need to go. And so I listening to both Eric and Jimmy, we are investing heavily in ensuring that we can get that 3.0 up in time for the auction. Each of our individual members is, like Eric said, they're looking at the auction, you know, in terms of how they'll may or may not participate. But our focus is on ensuring that 3.0 happens. And we have put together, I think, a pretty great team that's working within our organization. We brought a group of broadcasters, which includes both Fox and Capital, working towards getting that done. And I might be an optimist. That's kind of my nature. But I think we can do it. And I've seen a great, tremendous leap in terms of where the 3.0 development is today than where it was a year ago. I think the CE manufacturers are way more engaged with broadcasters, which is important. There's other stakeholders out there that have and issues that have to be addressed, but they're getting work done, and I think you're going to see a lot more move in the next 6 months. So I tend to be an optimist that we get there.
To follow up a little bit on 3.0, I've had a lot of broadcasters tell me, look, this is life or death. Like, we have to have this. And I hear this in all of our circles, and we have a lot to talk about, but I don't hear anything out of the FCC. And the FCC does have to be on board in some sense, do they not, with 3.0?
Yeah, they will need to be. I think that part of it is just getting this standard to a point that you can
Present.
start to educate the FCC as well as the Hill where needed. And we're getting to that point. I mean, but you know, it needs to be a collaborative effort. I think you've seen a tremendous amount of collaboration within the ATSC process in the last year, and so I hate to use the term "stay tuned," but stay tuned.
It works.
Deborah, if I may just
Please,
add from the non-com perspective, in terms of, you know, I mentioned we are open-minded to the concept of channel sharing, but critical to that is the assurance that our stations will not have to cut back on any services that we offer to the public currently, or deny the public any potential services going forward. So in other words, we do not want to give up any of our multicast streams. And so our industry is really looking at and relying on increased compression and all the benefits of ATSC 3.0.
Okay.
So for our industry, I think the two need to dovetail hand in hand. I don't think that there can be successful channel sharing options without improved technologies, without the advent of 3.0 and those two dovetailing. So to your point, I don't hear a lot from the FCC either, but I would think that they should be paying attention to this, because for a successful auction and for participants, and again, speaking from the non-commercial side, that's a key component to our interest in the auction.
I see. Yeah, but we do hear a lot out of the FCC about the value, quote unquote, of broadcasting. And so this again could add to that. A quick yes or no. Based on the FCC timeline, the auction will commence in a year or less, first quarter of 2016. Is that too soon? Ms. Thompson?
Yes. Yes, it's too soon. No, it won't commence first quarter of
Okay.
2016.
Mr. Goodman?
Yes.
Mr. Moreno?
I forgot the question. We'd like it to happen sooner rather than later.
Okay, very well. Ms. Shelley?
I'm going to remain silent on that, because again, we're you know, the analogy is sort of how I sail. I just keep going, hit a sandbar, take the boat up, and keep moving, and that's kind of Pearl's mandate is to focus on the development of these future platforms, these future technologies. There's a lot of value in broadcasting. I have to say, you know, I live in Baltimore, and I experienced the riots. So it was interesting to watch my kids as they were downloading the WBAL app. So, you know, in terms of that, her station in Baltimore, and Scripps as well, and the other stations. But we were all glued to the television set for days. And,
Of course, yeah.
And I had my sitter. I was trying to get in and out of the train station. Not such a great thing to take the train these days to New York, but I do it a lot. And you know, there was curfews. People were trying to get home at night, and the entire town was relying on local broadcasting. And that, to me, is something that needs to remain.
Which brings me kind of to a question that I tossed out in an editorial not long ago, and I'd like to toss it out to all of you. Can a local television news operation survive without its own signal? Mr. Goodman, I'd like to ask you that question.
Well, yeah, I mean, so sure, I think, I mean, we have examples of that today. For instance, in our market, we have Time Warner Cable 14. Now, you know, they reset their boxes, so every time you push power, it starts on channel 14, which gives you some good ratings real quick. So yeah, I mean, it already does exist. Now they kind of do that statewide. But look, you know, I do believe that, you know, ATSC's 3.0 to me is so critical, because I am a big believer that over the air will actually become a more critical part of people's perception of content. And so from that perspective, yeah, I mean, I think if you want to be a powerhouse local news company in a local media market, you absolutely today need an over-the-air signal. And I think even more and more as as time goes by, we'll kind of see a resurgence of antenna or over-the-air reception. So yes, the answer is yes. And I mean, just as a little comparison, I mean, Time Warner 14, maybe does a 1 rating 1/4 hour a day, when we're, the other broadcast groups are pushing many times that.
Do you find that being in the community, that your properties are basically locally owned and your family's been part of the community, that morphs into localism itself being a business model?
Well, yeah, so, I think what Dad did years ago is, I think he got into the consolidation game for a while, in radio in particular. And I remember actually when I was young, I was middle school and high school when he was doing this, and he was traveling a lot. He was flying to these other communities. And I'm not saying this is bad, but, kind of warm out a little bit. And I think that's because he's such a product guy. And he was so much more comfortable working on the product in the market where he, sleeps, where he eats lunch, that sort of stuff, that, that's where he kind of turned the company strategy to is, hey, this consolidation stuff is good and it's a great business model, but it's just not where I'm comfortable, and this is just kind of the direction I want to take our company. And I'm very proud of that, and I want to continue that legacy. So, from that perspective, I do think that, our station, because we work and play inside of the markets where we operate, I think that does help us have a little bit more local community connection.
Understood.
Yeah, I would echo that. And again, I'm just going to bring up this because it's a recent example and personal one for me. But, in Baltimore, it was the local stations knew where to go. They knew the names of the streets. They were on it, I mean, great coverage. And that's what you looked to figure out what to do. And it's not necessarily just in emergencies. There's a lot of value. And again, the local ad model is the other piece to it. That I think that local broadcasters have a very strong hold on the local ad model, hyperlocalism. Nobody's really been able to break that yet. That said, they need to be innovating around that to ensure that they continue to have control that value. And
Understood.
that's some of what we're working on in terms of addressable advertising and targeting and buying audiences versus just reach. So.
Right. Okay.
Deborah,
Ms.
I'd like
Thompson.
to add the importance of the local station in terms of emergency alert information.
Oh, sure.
Public television is very proud of the fact that we're an important part of the wireless emergency alert system. We use our digital spectrum to feed the cellular head ends. So when you get an Amber Alert and your cell phone dings and goes off, or if there's a weather alert, we're part of that, and that's critical because not everyone's in front of a set. But every single alert will tell you to tune to your local station, your local television station, to get more information. And it's a partnership. It's not one or the other. And as Ann said, it's the local station that's there that can tell you which route to take to the train station or which areas are closed. And it's also concentrated on that local area, even less than the county. Some are county-wide, but many stations drill down even more refined than that, as opposed to a national network or a provider that's not there to do that. So I frequently think that gets lost in the conversation of how important local news is, and also local emergency alert information.
Well, I agree with that, and I've had people say, counter me and say, well, you can find all that information on the internet, but in an emergency, you're certainly probably not going to go looking for it. I mean, I live in an earthquake zone, and the news is typically on television first because they're shaking too. So they get it right up there. And the other thing that I've mentioned in that debate is it's not even necessarily emergency information, but maybe during a heat wave and brownouts, you have air-conditioned shelters, you have areas, you have no idea how to find any of this online, but you can turn on the local news and they're going to have those kind of things. So you're going to get information you didn't even know you were looking for.
Exactly, and there's no chance that it's going to be overloaded online
Right.
or on a cell phone.
Exactly, good point. Mr. Moreno, what is Fox's perspective and view on localism?
Look, at the end of the day, I think folks on the panel have said it. I mean, the fundamental business relationship, right, with the government is that the local broadcasters have a covenant with their communities in return for the spectrum. It's a license, and we have certain duties that I think as broadcasters we do very, very well. I do think, and this is pivoting a bit back to the auction, that is one of the conundrums of the cards that we're being dealt. And again, as a strategist, I can be very dispassionate about it. I can never be Jimmy. I don't live and breathe this business. I'm kind of an outsider that's come in and parachuted into this group. But you look at the reality of what the government is saying, it's a couple of things. One is they want us to continue to be in business. To me, that's one of the critical fulcrums around which we make the decision of whether or not to participate in this auction. But the conundrum is as follows. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, right? If this auction moves forward and it fails, I fear for us as a group, because I think the government has within its rights and power to go ahead and do this repack and make us and force us to do what's being right now done on a voluntary basis, not so voluntary. And so you then have to start thinking, well, if that's the case, and we're pragmatists, we're business people, we have shareholders, then what is the most likely successful outcome we could hope for? And that's where the conundrum comes in. Because almost all broadcasters win, at least in most of the large markets, where you actually lean into what the government's trying to do and try to go for the 126 megahertz. And that may seem counterintuitive. It's very scary. But at the end of the day, that's where, for example, if the government goes for the 84 megahertz band plan in Dallas, large market, the government doesn't need a single broadcaster. At 126, it may need 5. And so there's an opportunity for 5 broadcasters to potentially get dollars in return for participating and figuring out the duties on us, how to remain on the air and continue to be part of that covenant of being able to serve the community. So it's one of those really interesting, I call it a conundrum, where about the only successful place you can end up, if you're really, really unemotional about it, is to actually lean into what the government's trying to do and have the broadcasters participate aggressively so that there's a good outcome at the end of the day. You remain in business and potentially have dollars in your pocket. Because the other alternative, should the auction fail or it never happen, because of the legislation, that may be done forcibly upon us, and there is no chance for upside.
Interesting perspective. Mr. Goodman, methinks you have some disagreement.
No. I mean, I have always respected Eric, and I actually, I see exactly what he's saying. And do I agree or disagree? I actually, so if there was a law that guaranteed this wouldn't happen again in our lifetime, I'd be okay with it after ATSC 3.0.
Oh, by the way, we need more of your spectrum.
My point is like, everybody keeps saying once in a lifetime. What? Like, after, I mean, this isn't going to solve any, like, bandwidth crunch. It's not a spectrum crunch, it's a bandwidth crunch. Bandwidth is going to continue to ramp up. Video usage on mobile is going to continue to ramp up. And, you know, mobile providers are going to hit walls again. And so where are they going to come for more spectrum? So you give me a law that tells me that this will never happen again in my lifetime, my kid's lifetime, and that it's tied to ATSC 3.0, sure. Sounds like a good plan.
So this is where broadcasting as a platform, as part of the overall fabric of a distribution system in this country makes sense. And you just saw Will Law with his lineup of things that need to happen, and you saw the chart with, you know, in terms of video consumption, and I really liked his last point was something that we have been saying is that the broadcast platform can deliver an offload. He made that point pretty clearly with the Apple.
Yes.
And if you think about 3.0, it's an IPTV platform. And it not only will it deliver increased benefits on our core business that we do every day, and which we promise to do to the public, but it will deliver the ability to do addressable advertising, the ability, ancillary services, automotive, a lot of things we haven't even thought of. But it really meshes well with everybody else as they're moving to IPTV. And so that's part of the reason why we have to do this. But again, you really have to think about about broadcasting as a future platform. And I don't see, I think we're insane if we think as a country from a telecom policy that it should go away.
Insane, I like that. I want to move back to the auction, and Ms. Thompson, I want to begin with you. Non-coms and PBS member stations in particular have come under increasing financial pressure in the last decade. We all know that. Many are licensed by universities that are also under increasing financial pressure. And in that scenario, what was the impact of the Greenhill report on this community?
It's a great question, and it causes significant concern at APTS and sister organizations, CBB and PBS, and throughout the industry. As you mentioned, we're a diverse system, and we're not a network. Every single station is individually licensed. And many are licensed by universities, others by states, and some by communities, some by school systems, local school systems. We don't know ultimately what university presidents or what governors of states will decide. And they, ultimately the license is held by that governmental entity. We've worked very hard with our stations, our general managers, and our general managers are very connected to their communities around this auction. We are hopeful that any situation in which a university president or state governor wants to participate, that he or she will look at participating in the auction, but by still retaining spectrum. So either by channel sharing or moving from a U to V. For reasons that we think are so obvious that Ann just articulated, is that broadcast is and always will be an essential part of the fabric, an essential platform for communication. Secondly, all of our members and to public TV stations, the over-the-air only, or whatever we're calling it now, skews much higher than the national average. Those are important viewers. We have a universal service mandate, a statutory one, and we take it seriously. We serve everyone. And the third reason, I think, is because, as Jimmy said, we have a law that says this will be the last auction, but laws can be changed. So we're encouraging folks to understand, again, university presidents, state governors, and others, that spectrum is very, very valuable and only get more valuable. So if the access to and services to the public aren't convincing enough, then look at it from an investment perspective, and the value of spectrum is very, very valuable. So don't give it all away. Continue to, if you need to give some of it away to gain the funding, okay, but please keep those stations on the air. We have a petition now pending before the FCC that asks them to make sure at the end of the auction and repacking there are no white areas created without public TV service. It seems like a no-brainer to us, but we're still fighting tooth and nail to get that done at the FCC. So stay tuned on that one as well.
So what is the recourse, or what is the game plan if you don't get that, what is it, single channel per market guarantee for non-coms? That's basically what you asked for?
Right. We ask that as the FCC goes through its auction and repacking scenarios, before it calls closed the auction, if it on the final look, there's a wide area without public television service that it will reserve 6 megahertz of spectrum in that market for a future non-commercial use. And that can be in a V channel. We prefer UHF or high V, but it could be low V. But at least we have the ability in the future to go in and provide service to the people in that community with a public television service. That's what we've requested. That's what's pending. And recourse, that'll be the FCC's, well, we'll take it as their final ruling. So next step would be court.
Okay, all right, you heard it here. Okay, Ms. Shelley, how did the Pearl members respond to the Green Hill report?
So again, that's not our Pearl's mandate is investment and development of future platforms.
To continue broadcasting, right?
Yeah. So they're, as I said, very similar to Eric. I mean, they're taking the auction seriously. They're looking at it, but that's not Pearl's mandate. Our mandate is to ensure that there is a future. That's why we're focused on 3.0. Back to Jimmy's points there. There's a tremendous amount of efficiencies that come with the implementation of 3.0, but beyond that, it's all these other capabilities that I just mentioned, and so that's why we're investing heavily in that. And at the same time, we're looking at, opportunities on smart TVs, connected devices. Pearl was probably one of the first to do extensive ACR trials for interactive. So we did interactive live news, and we're excited about those applications. What we've seen there is a precursor to what 3.0 will bring, and we think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. I was recently at an evening meeting where one of the smartest engineers I know in the business, that happens to be part of the team next to me, sort of described 3.0 in the future, and he said, really think about the future television as really a large tablet on the wall. You take the glass that's in the living room, that really becomes a large tablet with IPTV. And I think that's a really interesting way to look at things.
Yeah. Okay, so as far as the Green Hill report, it was, yep, no, thank you. Okay, good. Mr. Goodman, the FCC's high-end payout estimate for Raleigh, North Carolina is $51 million and $18 million for Wilmington, where I think you have WRAZ in Raleigh and WILM-LP in Wilmington. So is there a possibility of channel sharing for your company?
Well, so one thing that's funny is, so that's one report that you got, and then a few months later you got another report, and I think those numbers went up, I don't know, 10, 20-fold. So
is that right, Mr. Padden?
It was pretty extensive. I think Raleigh shot up to about 360 or 400 million, and then Wilmington up to 120 million for estimated sale value. So no, I mean, honestly, I don't want to sit up here and say, hey, we're not going to participate in the auction. I will tell you something that it concerns me, being the skeptic that I am, is that the way those reports came out and the way that this is all being promoted and the value and how nobody's really talking about what happens after this, it occurred to me that, this in a way is a setup for if this does fail, or if it doesn't fail, probably some future problems for us. And what I mean by that is, the way this auction works from a logistical standpoint is there's basically a date in which your company has to throw their hat, in the ring and say, hey, we're interested. But that doesn't mean anything. So when you throw that hat in and you say you're in, and it would be, I mean, why wouldn't we all throw our hats in just to see what's going on, right? Just to look at the market, see what's going on. So we're gonna have 100% participation of people who are interested. So if the auction doesn't work, or it does work, and then 2 years after the fact, all this information is released, it can be used against us that we're also interested in this auction. And so I think that's something that I'm really concerned about, is that it's a little bit of a setup for the FCC in future years to say, hey, all these broadcasters, they're not really interested in their local communities. They want to sell their spectrum, and this, let's do another auction, or let's get more spectrum back.
That wouldn't be very nice of them. Mr. Moreno, I think you have some thoughts.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, at the end of the day, this is one of those, for me, funny things, again, as the dispassionate observer. What the FCC is doing is absolutely fundamentally brilliant. And the Green Hill report is the ultimate expression of a PR job.
I'll give you that.
And it's incredible. I mean, half of those numbers are just complete BS.
Absolutely.
In a lot of markets, it's not going to happen for anybody. And so you have to take it with a grain of salt. I guess that's why I'm happily employed by Fox. They pay me to think through this stuff. It's nothing but a snow job at the end of the day. They're trying to go ahead and game us as an industry. I think Jimmy's right. But in that context, again, the irony and the conundrum is you only win, we all win, by all participating. Will we be successful? I don't know. In some markets, it's going to be a race to the bottom. It's just the way it's being set up. And that's going to be unfortunate. But in some markets, that may not be the case. With a lot of participation, there may be some very interesting dollars flowing to multiple companies. But at the end of the day, look, we've run scenarios where if the FCC chooses to go for band plan 7, 84 megahertz, again, all of us could volunteer to participate in Dallas. They don't need us at all. All of those numbers in Green Hill are complete fiction. But if we all band together, work through and lean into the 126, 5 stations will trade. They need the 5 stations. And so there can be upside collectively for the broadcasters. Now the problem is, and you read the academics, again, the FCC economists are absolutely brilliant. At some point, somebody should win a Nobel Prize for this stuff. But it is unbelievable. If you read the academia, which I struggle, but I read it and plow through it, it's actually designed specifically to take advantage of both greed and participation. And in that world, where you have a ton of participants and there's no ability to communicate or do anything, it's going to be a race to the bottom. And the only winners will be the ones that have very low reserve prices, which for our company, we're going to be very disciplined about that. We're not going to sell spectrum on the cheap. It's a very valuable asset. So it's the conundrum of the whole setup. And it is a setup. There's no question around that. It's a brilliant plan by the government to achieve its policy goals. It is designed by economists who are literally trading on our ability and interest to potentially make money. But you have to be very skeptical along the way and very disciplined as you read a Green Hill report and couple it with your assets and know that in certain markets you're not going to get squat. They just dangled a ton of dollars, all theoretical, all figments of somebody's imagination.
Yet even following this fascinating work of fiction, 50 Shades of Green Hill, Fox, along with ION, Univision, and Tribune, met with FCC officials in February, that was after the report came out, to discuss participation. I want to read something from that ex parte filing. The broadcasters also explained that as established broadcasters with deep ties to and abiding commitments to their communities, they assign high value to their existing businesses and operations, and they intend to continue to serve their viewers with the same high level of service following the conclusion of the incentive auction. And I thought that was pretty interesting because when we first heard that they went to the FCC, we're like, oh my God, it's over. No, they went to the FCC with the message of, all right, what do you have? Explain this. And the coalition, this coalition of broadcasters, again, this is Fox, ION, Univision, and Tribune. I don't know how many stations that is, obviously over 100. Asked for 3 things. They asked for 3 things from the FCC before they were comfortable participating in the auction. A definitively stated clearing target of 126 megahertz. Dynamic reserved pricing explained clearly. I'm still working on that one. And allowed channel sharing arrangements after the auction. Now that third one, I think there's been some progress, but has there been sufficient progress on those 3 points for your constituency?
At this stage, the answer is no. Nothing is set until rules are final and broadcast and published. Those have not happened. We continue to do our work. For example, DRP remains a mystery to me, and I know there's people that are saying, oh, I think I get it. I'm usually the 4th grade test. If I don't get it, it probably means that that most normal people won't get it. And so that one is very troubling. It's interesting because, look, I will walk you through a scenario in Los Angeles
Okay.
and the conundrum the FCC faces. Again, back to being the dispassionate, so don't call me friend of the FCC or the government at this stage. But you start looking and running scenarios for 126. Our math shows that absent, setting aside reserve prices or anything, you would need 24 or 25 of all the stations in the marketplace, and there's 29 as far as I can count, to participate to hit the 126 band plan. That means almost 100% participation. And the way the government is setting it up is we, the broadcasters, have to show up with, I'm interested. Now, again, as a trained economist, and this is the way I've advocated for our company, Jimmy said it best, it's a free option. You just have to show up and say, yes, I'm willing to receive an opening price offer. It doesn't mean I take it. So the incentive is for everybody to participate. But again, the FCC at this stage is just saying, unless all the broadcasters participate, we're not going to be able to go for the big band plan. That's again, back to the conundrum. So for 25, 26 of the LA stations to participate, that seems pretty high. And again, I don't know if the government can do more in terms of raising the prices or the opening prices. Can it go ahead and use DRP or impairment to potentially solve the need to try to go for a bigger band plan? These are all questions that are completely unanswered at this stage. But it also shows that, for example, with only 12 or 14 stations participating in the LA market, which is very congested, they can't repack. They will barely clear 60. So you kind of sit there and look at all this data, and you have to have a point of view. And the point of view, and has my fingerprints all over that visit to the FCC, is if you take the macro view that they're going to do this to you anyway, then just lean into it. Just lean into it and try to understand that there's potential upside as an industry, but it's a game set by the FCC and their rules, and it's going to be tough to be able to overall win, certainly as an individual company, but certainly as an individual station owner.
Would you like to see them do away with dynamic reserve pricing? Not use it, I should say.
It's tricky because, again, this is one of those very hard questions. These are very brilliant people. You look at the only way they can go for higher bands is to potentially impair some of the spectrum.
Right.
The problem is that as soon as you, and I think Preston said it, it's like trying to sell your car and then smashing your window. As soon as you put impairment into the telecom spectrum, the carriers are not going to want it. So that will depress the prices. So you have this crazy conundrum. But of course, they invent this tool called DRP that, as far as I can read, they can do whatever they want, which is very dangerous. So I don't like it. Our company doesn't like it. And we don't like it more because we don't understand it. Things have to be transparent. They have to be understandable. They have to be able for us to communicate to our senior management team, to our board. These are huge dollar assets. And eventually, it will be a board-level decision to participate, to set the reserve price. So there's a lot of work ahead of us. And but we're working with the FCC to make sure we understand those rules.
I know it should make me uneasy that you and your team don't understand dynamic reserve pricing, but actually it makes me feel a little less stupid, to be honest with you, because I don't understand it either. Ms. Thompson, what about your constituents?
It's very confusing. I mean, given the fact that this is the first ever broadcast auction and none of us are really skilled in this sort of participation, it's very, very confusing to our stations and to our industry. It really is. And I absolutely agree. I think the FCC is brilliant in playing all of its cards. But ultimately, they do need broadcasters to participate. So I think that they've got to, meet us at least halfway, if not a little bit more, because we hold some cards too.
So right now, we're looking at a never-before-tried spectrum auction that presumably will commence in about a year or less, for which no one really knows what they can get for their license, what the opening bid will be, and what their share of the proceeds will be. Do I have that right?
At this stage, yeah, absolutely.
Sound about right.
But it's funny, that will never change, just to be very clear.
Yeah.
That will never change. That's the game we're being asked to play. You only find out if you play. It's like the lottery.
So everybody's going to play.
Risky business. Mr. Goodman, I wanted to ask you what your action plan is around the auction if you have to move your stations.
I'm going to chain myself to the tower.
That's a good action plan. There you go.
I can't take credit for that. That's my
Wait,
dad. He always says that.
We're going to cover that in UHD.
So we have a plethora of chains kind of stacking up out there just in case. No, I mean, you know, it is, you know, the FCC is taking a very, very aggressive stance here against broadcasting, and so we're going to have to, if they do this, if this is successful and there isn't, and I don't think there will be, some delay, which is what, you know, I would propose, I think we'll get our engineers in place. There's, depending on who you talk to, between 9 and 15 tower crews that are reliable to climb tall towers in the United States.
Yeah.
So, you know, we would try to obviously slot in as early and quickly as we could to get that done so that we didn't run into any regulatory issues, you know, late in the game. So
Yeah,
that's
you and
how
everybody else, though, right?
That's right. Yeah, I mean, that's part of the struggle that we all will face. So, I mean, I guess it would, I mean, it's not like we don't know how to do it, right? We know what to do and we know how to do it. I just don't understand why we're doing it right now.
And you have to have a channel assignment, and you have to tell your transmitter manufacturer what that is, and then they have to build that and get it to you in time so that you can get it up on your tower within that
Well, not just
construction
the
deadline.
transmitter, but your actual antenna.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have to replace your whole system essentially.
Are you content with the reimbursement fund program?
Well, I mean,
Content
in our
on
business,
it,
time is money, so no. I mean, I don't want them to pay me more than what the cost would be, however, because I'm not in the business of making money like that. But yeah, it's kind of like, you know, here we are, we're going to put our technology guys and our engineers on this project, which will result, let's say we do have to repack, will result in, and we will definitely have to repack, will result in basically the exact same thing that we have today, right? So we're going to get this new channel, we're going to change, we got to put up all this new stuff, we're going to spend all this time and all this money doing that. That's what all my engineering team's going to be doing versus working on, you know, how do we put these new RoboCams in, or how do we, you know, get a new Doppler radar in place, like I know the Magid individual earlier. So, but I mean, basically, you know, we're in the product business, not in, I mean, the distribution of what we do is critical, right? But it's just not what I would call product friendly for us to be spending all that time doing it.
But it's interesting. Again, back to the, again, the data tells you the truth, whether or not you react to it with emotion or not. The irony is that a repack is far simpler if the government takes 126. It just is, because you're going to go ahead and have less interruption. Again, from a repack perspective, the worst of all outcomes is if they go for, say, 84, because you have that much more movement in terms of the work of having to repack stations that didn't participate or didn't win. So back to the conundrum. It's one where, at the way we view it, is that this challenge, which I think is knowable and agreed by a lot of people, is there. I think this industry is resourceful. I think the government will have to do its part. I think manufacturing and technology has improved to the point that I believe that these things can be met with reasonable effort. But certainly I would caution against anybody using some of these challenges as the reason to either delay or not hold the auction. I think that's kind of silly and counterproductive.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't use that as my reason to not hold the auction. I mean, there's only one simple reason really not to hold the auction right now, other than, I mean, from my personal perspective, obviously ATSC 3.0, but like just from individuals and citizens, does anybody here, can anybody here, like over the next 10 years, if you could have an asset that you think would appreciate the greatest over that 10-year period, does anybody else here think that 600 megahertz wouldn't be like that bad asset to pick? So, you know, at the end of the day, you know, whether it's, you know, I'm a trained economist, right? I like to make money. I want to make a lot of money over the next 10 years. As a citizen, I want to make the most amount of money we can with the 600 megahertz spectrum. I believe the real reason to delay this is that this stuff is going to increase in value guaranteed. And it will be greater than the time value of money, and therefore we'll be making money on money. And so, I actually do have experience with an auction. In 2007, some of y'all remember John Green. John Green was an old colleague of mine. He's retired now, really good man. He and I actually got this idea with Sam Matheny, and we went out and we bought a 12 megahertz of spectrum across the United States, across North Carolina, okay? And, we went through all the strategy, and it was really cool. You had these like cards with all your security codes and all this stuff. It was a big deal. In 18 months, we turned that into the largest return our company's ever seen, probably, or ever will. And the numbers that we got are similar to what the numbers that the FCC is talking about per pop megahertz value to us. And that's so many years back. So I just think that there's a real just a disconnection with why are we doing this? Why does this have to happen in 2016? Versus why can't we work on this from a real spectrum plan and meld this all together so that the government can make the most amount of money and broadcasters can be well off well into the future.
But this is one of the
Okay,
things that
I'm afraid we have to cut off here. I think Mr. Richer is coming at us with the giant hook. So I apologize because we didn't get to LPTVs, we didn't get to translators. But to summarize, Ms. Thompson, she wants a channel in every market for PBS stations, for public non-coms. Mr. Goodman, stay away from his spectrum. He's hanging on to it. Mr. Moreno, interested in participating. They want to know some solid information on this auction. And Ms. Shelley, let's do 3.0. Let's get it there. Let's do it now. Okay? Thank you all very much. If you have any further questions for them, just corner them and ask. Thank you.